Everyone. As mentioned previously, we are going to have a look at some of the repair tools that are available to us in Adobe Photoshop. Let me get my image up and looking good, and let's zoom in. I'm just going to hit Command or Control 0 to get my full screen image. Over here I've got my layer. I have already cut out the background of this using a mask. As you can see, there's my mask here. Everything white is visible, everything black is invisible, and I can obviously disable that mask and get my image back, or right click, I can apply it, delete it, whatever else. And of course, if you double click in that mask, it will enter the mask mode, which allows me to actually do some really cool stuff. So we've got things like edge refine tools and stuff like that. At this point I'm going to cancel out of there, and we are going to look at doing some repairs on this. So if I zoom in on my image, there may be a few elements that I may wish to repair on this image. So I'm actually going to click on the layer itself. Please try and remember that the layer and the mask are actually two separate entities, so you need to make sure that you're selected on one and not the other. Otherwise you could very well be trying to repair the mask and not the image. So let's just jump in straight away and look at some of the main repair tools that Photoshop does actually have. And one of the main ones we're going to look at is the clone stamp, and the other one we're going to look at is the healing tool. Now they're both quite close in the middle. The shortcut for the stamp is S. The shortcut for the healing tools are J, and there are multiple of these. So once again, if you don't know the shortcut, you can find it here in the toolbar. And otherwise, once you do know the shortcut, then you can go Shift and J and cycle through these, or Shift and S and cycle through these. But realistically, pattern stamp we're probably not going to use, so S is fine for that. Let's actually just start with the spot healing brush tool. Shortcut is J. You'll notice there's spot healing brush, healing patch tool, content remove tool, red eye tool, which we're probably not going to use because we don't have any people with red eyes in this image. Spot healing tools, the sort of go-to, nice easy one. You can adjust your brush size as usual, as you do with a brush tool. I use the square brackets, and essentially this is good for doing little elements. So let's have a quick look how this works. I've got this little branch here, and I'm just going to brush over that, and it does a pretty good job of cleaning that up. Let's see how it goes with these dents here that have been taken out by a forklift, and give it a few seconds, and that's pretty good. So you essentially just brush over. What you want to try and avoid doing is getting a big brush and just sort of doing a big brush over. Besides it taking a few moments, it's going to take image from all over the place, and you're going to end up with this weird funky mess going on here. So I'm going to undo that. So you've got a few options here. Content aware and also proximity match. Proximity match is essentially going to look at the area around the object. So once you get the hang of this, you may need to sort of switch between content and proximity to depending on what's going to work better for you. But it's good for little things. As you can see, it can get confused though, so this is why we need to be aware of other ones. So I've got rid of that window relatively easy. I'm going to undo that though. So let's jump to the next one. The actual healing brush does have a little bit more precision, and what it allows you to do is if you press the Alt key, you can see it brings up a little target system, and this allows me to actually sample a specific area. So I'm going to sample, I'm actually going to look where the shadow is, and I'm going to click on there because that's going to come into play, and I'm going to start painting over my object here, and you can sort of see where I've sampled from and where it's going to go to, and this way it's actually going to start sampling there. So use that Alt key to refix it. It's pretty much got rid of that window altogether there, and this is really useful for areas where it's just the stock standard healing brush, which you don't really have that much control over, is just not going to work. And you can say, look, I definitely want to sample from this area and bring that over here. When you get to areas along the edge here, this is where things really start getting a bit weird, because we're going to end up with a blurred area, so between the dark lines and that. If you want a little bit more precision, jump in, use your selection tools like poly lasso tool, and select the area that you want this to be, that you don't want it to go out of, and then you could potentially jump in and I'm grabbing the wrong tools, spot healing tool, and we could sample up here. Now there's a good chance it's still going to mess up because it's taking influence from some other areas, but sometimes it's just a matter of sort of going over a few times, and sometimes you can get it to a pretty good fudge, and that way it's not going to. I'm going to hit Command D, wrong button, to deselect, and you can see it's reasonably good there. So I'm kind of going ahead and just hammering away on this particular layer. An interesting one to try and consider as well is you can create a blank layer and do this. So you just need to make sure that sample is on all layers. As this is a blank layer, if I have it on sample current layer, there isn't anything on this layer, so it's not going to do anything. So if I can go current or below or all layers, now when I sample an area, and let's say I sample this window and start painting it in, you can see it does a composite of that window and the background, but this is on a blank layer by itself. So you can actually do that. If you're not 100% sure or you want to have some adjustment later, then that's an important thing to try and consider. The next one down is the patch tool. Now with the patch tool, unfortunately you don't have the option of creating a blank layer and using that. It actually needs to be on the layer that you are trying to repair. And with the patch tool, you can literally just draw around the object that you wish to potentially remove or move elsewhere. And you can see we've got source or destination, and you can actually grab that and you can say, oh, well, I want something that's going to be a composite between these two. And by composite, what I mean is if you actually look at that, you can see it's trying to integrate the background image. So the shadow areas here are going to affect where I place that. And this is why it's important to be aware that this is slightly different to the stamp tool, because it looks at the background. And sorry, I keep pressing the wrong key. That's what happens when you switch between PC and Mac quite often. So let's undo that. So if I drag this over like this corrugated area here, you can see now it's picking up the grey of the corrugated area. So it's trying to fix it up, going, you want this texture over this area. So that's the patch tool, and it works really well for doing. There it goes again. I'm pressing the wrong button. I'm trying to press Command D, and I'm keep pressing Command S. So I'm not looking at the keyboard. I haven't used the computer for a while. So Command D to deselect that. The other way, while I deselect it, I'm just going to reselect it anyway. If you change it from destination to source, you can see as I drag this over, and this is the one I most commonly use, you can actually see I can try and find an area that's going to be of a good repair nature. So this one's got the shadows. I can try and align those up and let it go and deselect, and there it goes there. So this is really, the patch tool is really good for like large areas, and sometimes you just need to sort of build it up in multiple passes. So if it doesn't do a perfect job the first time, you might need to do it in sections, and then over and over again, just sort of start shifting that around until it looks good, and you don't end up with weird little repeat patterns and stuff like that, which is the bit that for those in the know, you want to avoid those weird repeats when you're doing repairs. That's the sign of bad photoshopping. Next one down is the content aware move tool, and for this, what I'm actually probably going to do is I'm just going to, because I've destroyed this image, I'm going to just do a duplicate of my background, and I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to drag. Got to unlock it first. Sorry, if it is locked, you can double click to unlock it if it's the background layer. Otherwise, hit the unlock key here, and I'm just going to drag that mask onto here and delete that previous one. So I'm going to pretend I've got these windows back for demo purposes. So with the content aware move tool, what you can actually do is you can select around an area, and don't forget, though I'm just clicking and dragging around, this is a freeform selection thing. You can use any of your selection tools, your elliptical tools, your lasso tools, quick selection, whatever that may be. And what we can actually do with this is I can actually start moving this window, and I can scale it as well, or rotate it as required, and I can hit apply when I'm happy for that, and it's going to do a little bit of thinking about it. A little bit, could be quite a bit, and it's going to try and move that window to its new location, scale it, try and fit it in, and at the same time it's going to try and remove it from its previous location. So it's kind of a time saving thing. It looks a bit weird because it's off on the side, but it can be really happy, and happy coincidences sometimes. But sometimes it's just like if you want to move a person or a car or a signpost or something, you go, oh, it's here and I want to move it there. Let's do another example maybe with this post here, so you get the idea. So let's select that, and content aware move tool, let's move it over, let's drop it over here and scale it, and I'm going to hit apply. So watch over here as I hit apply when it finally clicks through, and let's see how it processes that. And there we go, it's done a reasonable job. It's cleaned it up from there reasonably well. Integration here is not fantastic. It's left a bit of a ghost here, but I can clean that up potentially, and if I had a better selection it would be a lot better as well. So let's just take that back, and I'm just going to get back to my image. The other tool that I'm going to recommend, so that's healing tools, fantastic. Patch tool I really do enjoy, big areas for that. The next one I'm going to talk about is the clone stamp tool. This one is really good. All it basically does is it allows you to sample from one area of the image and basically start painting it in another area. So it does work like a brush, and if you right click you can actually see you've got access to all your different types of brushes. I usually use a soft round pressure opacity for most things, but occasionally a good hard round brush is going to be useful depending on what you're after. And let's have a quick look how this one works. Once again, you can have the sample all layers, which means that I can have a blank layer and it's going to look below it, or you can have only sampling the layer that you're on. Now I'm actually going to create a blank layer again for this, and let's not drop it into the grid folder. There it is there, there's my blank layer, and I've got a sump on all layers, and this one's relatively straightforward to use. There is one main button that we need to keep an eye on. It's called the align button, and this is just going to be something that's going to be a little bit useful for us to consider. So I'm actually trying to find something that's going to be quite remarkable in this image, because I have, it's fairly bland at this point. But let's jump in. In order for the stamp tool to work, we actually need to sample an area, and very similar to the heal brush tool, we press Alt, so it's S for stamp, let's bring that, to bring up a target area. So let's zoom in. Once again, I'm hitting Command plus or Control plus to zoom in, and as I hit Alt you can see this little target system, and usually what I look for is a corner of something. So if I'm going for this window, I'm going to click in the corner, and then I'm going to left click to sample that. And as I start moving my cursor around, I no longer have my finger or any buttons on my mouse. I can actually see the ghost of that image. Don't forget, you can adjust your brush size. As I do, you can start seeing more of the image. And what this is going to allow me to do is actually start painting in, and if you look to the left you can actually see that it is now sampling exactly from that image. And if I keep going down you can see it's starting to select the ground plane and everything. So the way that I will usually use this is I will paint in the area that I need and then resample the next area, and then you can also start building further down, for example. Now I did mention there's two main things in this. One is aligned, which means, let's undo that, once again just sample there, which means if I start painting over there's my new window, and I take my finger off the mouse button and start painting again, you notice that every time I paint it's going to just start from that same corner. So if I wanted something funky where these windows are repeating, then having aligned turned off is going to work for me. However, if I have aligned turned on, as soon as I decide where I'm going to start, so I'm going to start over here for again, as I start painting, you can see there it is there. But if I move over elsewhere, let's say I move over here, it's not going to start redrawing those windows again. It's literally just going to keep aligning just from where I started, which is slightly to the left, and you can see, we start moving everything across. The real trick to this is kind of herding things in. Use the Alt key to just resample. So if you are trying to remove areas, sometimes it's just a matter of Alt selecting outside and then painting them back in. Sample from each side, and you can see I'm just pressing Alt as I start moving this in, start selecting the shadows, and this can be great for fixing up elements on paving and stuff like that. Once again, if you really do need some precision in this, jump in, use your lasso tools to define an area so you don't go outside the line, and then you can go S for stamp, Alt to select the area, and I'm just going to paint in down the base here, and I can get that really clean, crisp edge if that's what I'm chasing. But I'm going to undo all that. I don't actually need all that funky stuff that's going on there. And in fact, I've got to the point where I've demolished this so badly that I'm just going to go back to the original one here, and let's unlock that one, and I'm going to delete it. So there's my original. It's got the dents, it's got the windows. I'm actually kind of happy with that, but I've got rid of these, so let's continue with that one there. And I've already removed with the mask here some of the background in the previous video. So there's the basic heal tools, heal and clone stamp tools. If you need to remove elements, it is well worth getting to know these. These are photo repair staples, and if you do need to get rid of elements, these are fantastic to do that sort of thing.